Keep your hands and head inside the vehicle at all times. Buckle your seatbelts, check your mirrors, sit on back and relax. It's lights out and away we go for the Tall and Short of It podcast. All right, cool. Well, welcome everyone to a very special episode of the Tall and Short of It podcast. I'm happy to be able to say we are coming to you live from Aaron's apartment living room. Aaron, it's good to see you in person. How are you, dude?
I'm good. It's been a bit, so I'm glad to see you too. Glad that we could get together and make this happen. Happy 100th episode for all of our faithful listeners. We appreciate it all, and so we were excited to do something a little different for this week's episode. I think that hopefully there will be more opportunities for live episodes in the future, and we're looking forward to them. So,
well, and just to it's crazy how just easier this feels, just like right off the rip. To me to feel like, well, I'm gonna sidetrack us here real quick. I just want to give the listeners a little bit of a behind the scenes, in the sense that we've just come off trying to, troubleshoot this whole thing. It's funny that Aaron says, hopefully we'll be able to do this in the future, because now we know exactly how not to do it in the future, which is hilarious. We've had some significant equipment malfunctions, but we are here and we are rolling and very excited to get into it. But I think to continue just the normal show, Aaron, let's talk about our rose, thorns, and seeds here.
Sounds good. So for my rose, thorn, and seed for this week, my rose, we had a really nice Labor Day weekend over at the shore. Spent some good time with friends, celebrated my buddy Zach's birthday, along with just Labor Day weekend and all. Sunday was cool. Everyone watched the F1 race with me. I turned it on in the living room. Everyone was hanging out, watching. Had lots of questions about different things. The terminology was it was interesting to see what everyone was picking up on in terms of F1 terminology. We had a lot of questions about the free pit stops, because everyone, the announcers, everyone's calling it a free pit stop when there's a safety car, a virtual safety car. And so I'm having to explain, this worked out in Max's favor this week and everything, but it's just kind of luck of the draw. It could be where you are on the track. It could be any number of things, and other drivers have benefited throughout the season from similar things. We saw George early on in the season getting a lot of those similar, just lucky timing safety cars that gave him the opportunities to get early, good finishes. Much to Lewis's chagrin, but it was
big time.
Similar this week. So I explained that it's just it's not free, quote unquote. It's just that because everyone's slowed down, they don't lose as much time against their opponents when they're taking those pit stops. They're still losing time, but
they're just not under pressure while in the pits.
Or because everyone's slower, instead of losing 19 seconds because the guy's flying up on you so fast, everyone's going slower, so you don't lose as much of the gap overall. So it was cool just getting to enjoy that with them. Everyone joked around that it would be my rose this week, watching F1 with with my friends, and it was really cool, and a fun time to kind of share. I don't expect any of them to become weekly or seasoned race followers, but the fact that they took the time to chill, it was a casual Sunday morning. Everyone was still kind of collecting themselves from Saturday, and so it was a cool way to start the day. So,
well, and even from a casual perspective, is it an enjoyable broadcast? Because overall it is pretty laid back. There are no commercials, so you're kind of in it the whole time. There's an amount of laps where not every moment is important. So I'm curious what the new F1, what F1 looks like to somebody who doesn't know much about it.
I'd have to get probably a little deeper onto their opinions, because I was also myself trying to follow along the race and enjoy it. But it seemed like they understood the broadcast decently well and all, and were picking up on things. They, I think at this point, from me talking and everything, have enough of an idea of how things work that it wasn't too overwhelming with like new information. But nonetheless, I think the broadcast does a good job with it.
Yeah, I agree.
So I didn't have much other than words like free pit stop and things like that that people were like too confused about. So from that side of things, it seemed like they did a nice job with the broadcast and all.
Sure.
So so that is my rose. It was a nice time. My thorn this week, Colleen and I went for our first bike ride since I got my bike set up and everything yesterday, and just partway through, I was just getting some knee pain in my right knee, which is my like quote unquote bad knee.
Gotcha.
That usually swells up and stuff when I do long drives and whatnot. So I'm curious to see if that was just like maybe the way that I had my bike set up. I had to tweak some things after the ride to like adjust things and make sure it was fitting me properly a bit more. So maybe it had to do with that. Maybe it's just use of muscles that I don't typically use in like my normal exercises. It's very possible it's a different exercise. I don't do much biking. But hopefully that won't become a larger issue, but it was just a little something that I was wary of after feeling it. I was like, that could be a problem. It didn't hurt like badly, but I was like, took notice of it.
Gotcha.
Then my seed for this week was that I did get the bike. Looking for like just the ride that we took. We went for, I think it was about an hour or so, and did a little over 10 miles. It was like we just kind of cruised through. It was, our area around here is very nice for biking. It's very flat, so it was just a nice ride in general. Went down to the Philadelphia Art Museum and kind of went around. So overall, a nice ride. And I'm looking forward to the cooler weather and like more opportunities to go biking with Colleen, with her cousin, and some of her other friends that like to bike as well. So that is my rose, thorn, and seed for this week.
Very cool. That sounds very neat. The bike is a great, it's an exercise device. It's a transportation device. I think it's a device that represents freedom. So I think that's pretty cool. It's nice that there's some areas around here that are fun to use. I know the area that's just right up here looks pretty good with all the dead people there. So not too creepy, I imagine, when you're driving around on the bike.
Yeah, that's actually one thing that I'm weird about. I feel like I'm comfortable like walking and going on walks through the cemetery. I feel weird about biking through because I feel like, a little bit. I feel like if I'm walking, then it's just quiet and like not distracting enough to anyone who's there, like respecting the dead. And also if I'm on a bike and just cruising around and all, I'm not really taking it in the same way. Like when we walk around, we're reading gravestones, we're looking at names, we're looking for like really old dates and kind of things like that. So I feel like that's a bit more of a like respectful on my end for those folks. But from the biking, like there's tons of trails and stuff around, so I can dodge out on the cemetery for that.
Yeah, I guess on your left hits a little bit different in a cemetery. But
yeah, that probably wouldn't go over too well, as there's like people mourning and everything. So it's interesting, but I like the area for walks, but there's plenty of good spots for rides, and I'm looking forward to utilizing that a bit more.
Sure. Yeah, just no bike ride in the cemetery. My rose here for the week is obviously episode 100. I've been very much looking forward to it. It's interesting to think that, an element of some podcasts is, well, they're in person, but I think just for our setup, it hasn't been like, that's not the easiest thing to incorporate, so it is fun that like just having a conversation in person is something that you're like, hella looking forward to.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is a cool part of our podcast, that we've been able to, even though we're at a distance from conveniently like meeting up, that we can still consistently do this week after week and all. Something that years ago, when podcasts were first starting and everything, probably would have been really difficult, and we've been able to pretty easily make it work. And now have opportunities to do ones live periodically and everything, which is very cool.
Yeah, as long as we're not burning up the equipment. My thorn here for the week is a little bit on behalf of Sarah. So she had a really busy week, family on vacation, some like responsibilities fall on her, which means that I have to be a little more receptive to helping, and not that I'm, not wanting to lend a helping hand, but just sometimes what they ask of her can just make it stressful on the whole household, stressful for Sasha and things like this. So when she's stressed, things get like stressed just for us in general. So just kind of tough times for Sarah. Just wanted to, be supportive, be there for her. But yeah, overall, definitely feeling that this week. So looking forward to a little more smooth sailing now that her family's back from vacation, and everything goes back to normal.
How far away from you guys is her family?
Her parents' house is not far from us. It's like less than 10 minutes.
Okay, but is there not a way that they could have a neighbor or someone else like that, like keep an eye on things or whatnot? I don't know. It's like I understand the convenience of having some family close by, but with your busy schedules, you're running a business and everything, you probably looked at your schedule when they asked and were like, oh, this is going to be a lot.
Right. Well, they don't ask. They just tell.
It's just expected.
Yeah.
And that's kind of not cool in a way itself, of course, because it's like, if they ask, then you can at least have a conversation and be like, oh, hey, like, we can do this, or this day and this day, or like easy for us, but would you be able to have the neighbor come by and take a look at things, or take a pet out or whatever, or feed the cats or whatnot? I don't know what all it's involved, but that way you could still offer that up. And so that, I think, would be a frustration on my part too. I am happy to do things for my family, but I appreciate them asking, as if like, if I do it, it's out of the kindness of me wanting to and my ability to do it, instead of just expecting.
Yeah, it's quite frustrating, and like she feels that as well. So yeah, it was just a lot of just a lot of concessions. Hey, we got to do this in this way, not this way. We got to do this in this way. So yeah, just like it being put on your plate is just a little frustrating. So that's my thorn here for the week. My seed, I just want to give myself an old pat on the back. There is a strategy that I've been working on with my therapist, that when this thing happens, I'm going to do this. And, putting the plan in place is one thing, but actually remembering the plan and then carrying out the plan in the moment is a whole nother thing. But I was presented with an opportunity recently to act on every bit of that plan and activate the decisions made previously when I wasn't at such an elevated state. And I'm just super elated to be able to go back and be like, yeah, I did the thing, I liked the thing, and then I keyed in on the fact that I did do the thing and I'm proud of myself. You reward yourself, and then so hopefully you can do more of that in the future. So I was just very pleased about my seed here this week.
Nice. I think that's a real good positive. I think in my therapy and whatnot, I've had similar things like that where my reaction to most things is to emotionally like act out, and not act out in a negative way necessarily, but in a I need to find a solution immediately kind of way. As opposed to like kind of pause it. My big thing is I just start to act before thinking through, and instead of doing something the most like productive way, I just go to the way that I can do it the quickest, because that's the first thing that comes to my mind. And so like for me, it's taking a step back from a situation that has me caught off guard or whatnot, and going, okay, I'm like thrown off, let me just sit and think for a little bit, think through the situation instead of just immediately reacting to it. So I think the biggest thing for me has been noticing when to utilize that thought process and all, and that's I think the hardest part, because getting practice will help make you better, but if you forget to do the practice when that opportunity comes up, that is like the key for like potentially just flopping on it and looking back and going, oh man, another missed opportunity to do this thing that I wanted to work on. And opportunities don't always present themselves frequently. So it's just like, well, hopefully I remember next time. But once you do, it helps it click, I feel like.
Yeah, and you hope it doesn't take too many opportunities for it to really click. Because like you were saying, you're not presented with the opportunity to like improve on the behavior. So I mean, you just keyed into it. It's just like remembering to do it is sometimes an impossibility. But yeah, it sounds like we are, getting a little bit better, getting a little chock full of therapy here is what I like to say. But one person who may need therapy after this weekend is Carlos Sainz after the Hungarian Grand Prix. Let's get into it.
Absolutely. And so as we're getting into it, just a couple of side notes, but I know I brought it up on the podcast a few weeks back, but Red Bull, Porsche looking to buy out a big portion of the Red Bull team. That seems to have failed, and it seems to be due to Red Bull's success with kind of running their own engine team and everything, and them kind of evaluating their value to be higher than what they initially were discussing with Porsche. So that plan is falling through because I think Porsche does not want to spend that much money buying into it. So they won't have an agreement. Helmut Marko and the Red Bull team seem pretty confident with their engine team and everything that they've taken over from Honda, and I think probably with them, as we kind of talked about, they fired up their first 2026 engine recently, so maybe they've seen some good things with that and are going, oh wow, like, and we have all this time to get things in order, like this is great. But Audi, it also was announced the other week that they will be joining F1 as I believe an engine supplier in 2026. So they open up more opportunities for teams to kind of have their own engine and whatnot from another manufacturer. I believe that they are possibly bringing that in primarily through the Sauber F1 team. So Alfa Romeo, I think, will be out. I don't know if that means that Audi will be now like Sauber Audi instead of Sauber Alfa Romeo. I'm not sure exactly like how that all will work out, but I believe that's how they're kind of coming into the realm initially, with a partnership there with Sauber.
Gotcha. So then you would have, I imagine though, if they're just supplying the engine, they don't really care about the driver lineup. They probably just leave it, whatever it is, or up to whoever else, and they're just caring about putting engines in vehicles. struggles not having a team.
And like set up with the like the constructor that's building the cars and everything.
Yep.
So
Gotcha.
I believe engine line or driver lineup and whatnot would still be under Sauber's kind of decision making, but a cool thing, and we'll of course get more information on the horizon. Another big thing, Colton Herta has been looked at, as we mentioned, with a number of teams, but with McLaren signing Oscar Piastri, F2 champion from 2021 and all, that lineup spot is not open. So if the FIA does grant Colton Herta a super license, because technically I believe Joseph Newgarden is one of the few people in IndyCar that was not previously an F1 driver that would have the super license available to them.
Okay.
So if the FIA decides for Herta, AlphaTauri is looking at potentially signing him into Gasly's spot, since I believe Alpine is looking heavily at Gasly to move into their lineup. So that would just kind of leave, for Danny Rick's sake, since we've kind of been talking about his options, that would only leave really the Mick Schumacher spot or Latifi spots open as kind of available options. And in that case, since he is so set on still competing strongly and everything, I don't know if he would be even interested in that. But
yeah, I can't imagine him wanting to go like way backwards, because there's no way he's ever even coming close to points in one of those cars. It doesn't feel like.
And it's interesting because both teams have shown some progress.
It seems per track though, right?
It does, and it seems like they had a jump early on in the year, but maybe have not been able to produce the upgrades and whatnot from the team side. So, I mean, Alex Albon still has been performing super well and getting into the race this weekend and everything. He has had some really solid performances that I think give me a little bit of hope for that Williams car. But talking about Carlos Sainz, he did have a pretty unhappy race, like you had said. He's going to have to talk to someone. He had said that the penalty that they gave him for the unsafe release was just fake and whatnot. But I feel like that was something that is more on the, if I'm the driver, I'm just looking at the team and going, guys, like, why did you tell me it was good to go when there's someone coming in? Like, that's on your engineers, that's on your pit crew.
Yeah.
So I think his frustration towards the FIA was a little, I guess you don't want to dish it at your team, but I feel like that's where it should be kind of directed. So. Well,
it's tough to know how you do that. Do you do a suspension for the team that was responsible? Is it a monetary thing?
I mean just more from Carlos's side, like being like, instead of being like, oh, if they give me a penalty for that, that's just, they're making it up.
Right.
To put me back. But if that's the case, I'd be like, guys, you gotta just be on top of this better, like from Carlos's side, as opposed to the FIA. I think the penalty, the 5-second penalty, was warranted either way.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Because I was gonna say, I think it seems like a large section of the team, like anything that happens, or like any mistake by these members, it all just falls under, well, the driver gets penalized because it all falls under like racing action or racing whatever.
Yeah. I think just more from the driver's side,
like
to
the
be like
owning of the mistake, you're saying?
Yeah, being
gotcha.
Like, hey, like, yeah, this negatively affects me, but it's not my fault. The team needs to get it together.
Right, so instead of calling a call like fake.
Yeah, being like...
Okay, I understand now.
So I think that was... obviously his frustration was shown with the weekend. He didn't have phenomenal pace. I mean, just in qualifying, he was still a little ways off of both Max and Charles. I know that being behind Charles, I'm sure frustrates him because that's kind of his closest competitor, but also knowing that they were going to have a better opportunity this week with their pace, and they couldn't quite get it there. Their race pace was not quite what they expected either.
Right.
And then, of course, just more weird Ferrari strategy calls. We have Leclerc being told to box and not being told what tires he's going on to, and he's like, tell me before. They're like, yeah, we did tell you, and whatnot in the team radios. There was just some weirdness again, and they unfortunately caught the bad break on a couple of the safety cars that Max benefited from, and didn't end up with a great shot overall.
Well, I think the main thing that happened to Carlos was it was like a 30-second pit stop because they had 3 out of 4 tires. The back left tire was coming from the garage.
Yeah.
And that just like...
Well, actually, so I watched a video, that went from my memory for a second.
Yeah.
The guy with the back left tire was in the front right. He had it and was like in the wrong position. And like had to run around the back. I also was like,
that's just as bad.
Mind blown because they left one of the wheel guns on the ground and Checo hit it. I was concerned that was going to cause damage to Checo's car on the way out. So yeah, the guy just like was in the wrong spot. Of course, Carlos also got hit by Lewis early on in the race, and so he just like bad just got worse and worse.
Dude, it's crazy watching the pit crew, like when that's going on, they literally can only just stand there and watch until like the piece of the puzzle that they need gets slotted in. Because like they can't like help in any way, they just have to wait.
And
it's
any movement from someone is going to like cause someone to flinch or like not get to where they need to when they're already behind. So it's like just staying still is like the best option. It's just freeze. You finish your part and you just freeze until the car drops and goes.
But yeah, nightmare for Carlos Sainz in the pits, and then just, in every other aspect afterwards. Charles Leclerc didn't seem like he had like race winning pace. It looked like he was struggling for a decent amount of the race. Obviously he was up near the top, but his pace wasn't anywhere compared to the Mercedes or even the the Red Bull at the front. Obviously, he still gets on the podium at the end of the day, but his pace was considerably slower than Russell and Max.
Yeah, they just ended up with the fortunately better tire strategy at the end than what Lewis ended up on. I mean, we saw Lewis kind of just get passed by pretty quickly at the end by both George and Charles, and Checo getting passed as well on kind of a tougher tire strategy also. But along with that, Checo had old engine parts fitted into his car this week, so for whatever reason, I guess provide a little longevity, or maybe they didn't want to take a whole new power unit, so you fitted old parts that were not worn out into it. So I think I didn't expect Checo to have quite the engine power that we were seeing. I wouldn't be surprised to see him take an engine penalty like next week maybe.
Gotcha.
Since he didn't take one when there was that big slew of people last week that took them.
Yeah, well, that seems dangerous for a team to have put both of your drivers in the back.
Right,
because that would have been
exactly.
both Max and Sergio with penalties. So yeah, they're likely looking for one coming up here soon. There was a great bit of racing between Lewis and Checo at the one point. A couple of turns long, Lewis looked for a pass. I think on the outside, and Perez held him up for a decent while. And it was when Max was kind of pulling away, so I think it may have held him up a little bit. It was barely a lap long, but just some pretty good racing from those two. Similar like we saw with Mick Schumacher, Sebastian Vettel, kind of early towards the race. We saw a couple of corners, Mick coming up the inside on Vettel. So actually some like pretty interesting racing going on. I guess is all I'm trying to say. Yeah,
it wasn't a bad race in terms of action at all. I felt like there was some good mixing up throughout the race. And kind of speaking to looking at safety cars later on, although Checo held up Lewis for a bit, and I know the idea of a free pit stop was like one of the things that my friends were confused about, but Max ended up taking 2 pit stops at the end, which worked out really, really well.
Genius.
But at the same time, he did lose more time in doing that than he would have with just one safety car or one pit stop.
Yeah.
Like, Lewis was gaining, he was right around the 19-second mark, which was how much drivers were losing on a pit stop. And so, I think he was actually closer to about 12 seconds back, and the second person was 19 seconds back or so. Anyway, Max would have been able to take the pit stop on the hard tires and go all the way to the end easily with fresher tires than Lewis, and the hard tires seem to be working well. So I think he catches him there anyway.
He would have had to make 2 overtakes, though, on both George and Lewis.
He would have, but I think that in general it was definitely within reason that he would have been able to, just with the straight line speed and everything, because even though the Mercedes was just as quick around the track in general, I think, the Red Bull still has just better straight line speed and would have picked up those DRS and everything for Max to catch up. I think he was lapping at a pretty good pace on the hards until the second safety car happened, which I did, of course, want to talk about a bit because I'm not sure how much of it you saw, but there's a lot of haters out there in the world.
Esports,
and there were a ton of people that I saw that came out, and to the point that teams made announcements, but people were accusing AlphaTauri of basically sending out Yuki again to give Max a second safety car to be able to switch on to soft tires, or to give Max to manufacture a free pit stop.
Yeah, sure, the conspiracy theory take.
And to the point where, and I think like part of it does also fall on the broadcast, which was something I think in general they do a good job, but Ted Kravitz, I think he's generally entertaining, but he definitely has some biases that come out, and he has said things multiple times about like thinking that, it would benefit Red Bull if Red Bull had AlphaTauri start Pierre and Yuki from the pits when Max is at the back of the grid, so he has less people to pass, and like he's made comments like that in previous weeks and does seem to not have to be a big fan of Max. But I saw, fortunately, Will Buxton, Matt Gallagher in the WTF1 team, like a number of people came out along with AlphaTauri. Basically, AlphaTauri was like, we work completely separately from Red Bull. Like, we are like partners in certain things, but we are not by any means competing, and like we treat each other as competitors,
right,
not as like teammates that we would do anything. They're like, that takes away not only from our own strategists and the hard work that they put in, but also from Red Bull strategists and all the effort that they do.
Yeah.
Like for just the situation was weird. Like, Yuki thought there was something wrong with the car.
Super confusing, man.
He started undoing his belts to get out because he thought that the car, like, he thought he was going to have to just leave the car where he stopped the first time.
Right.
Like, no, bring it in. So he which is crazy that he drove with the seatbelts undone, like, around the track. But at that point, I mean, that's what the team's telling you to do.
Right.
And, like, you just kind of, in the moment, go with it.
So that's what they were doing, digging around in the thing.
So
they were trying to buckle his seatbelts.
Rebuckle and tighten his seatbelts
Cool.
to adjust them properly, and then send him back out. And people are like, well, why would you send him back out? He's 2 laps down. And I'm like, we've plenty of times seen people be multiple laps down and go back out in the race because you could get a safety car where they allow the cars to overtake and you loop back around and are able to get back in queue, not down a lap, and then who knows what can happen because there was a decent bit of race left. But,
I don't understand that. The whole, like, that just seems a little bit defeatist and a little bit quitting. Like, it is in the best interest of these teams to finish. Like, what do you mean not finish?
Right. They're like, why would you send him back out if they're... It's like, well, they didn't know what the problem was.
He's like, that's all you do
Like,
is you just...
You drive until the car is, like, not able to drive. Like, your job is to drive.
You just keep it going.
Yeah.
That's
so
hilarious.
it was just bizarre because also from the side of, like, Red Bull, and this was Matt Gallagher's point, talking about it, he was like, why would Red Bull, they're up like 100 points at least in both standings. Why would they risk someone like the FIA being like, oh, you guys cheated, and losing the entire season just because of they wanted to win at Max's home track? Like, that's the only reason that you could say they would have manufactured something because they're so far ahead in everything else that finishing second to Lewis or second to Charles is not a detriment in the long run if Max finishes right there. He's losing.
It could even happen in multiple races.
He's losing, like, he could not finish for the next 4 races and still have a lead in the driver's seat,
which is
like,
disgusting.
Like, there's absolutely no reason for it, and so I was just like, this is nutty. But it was a bizarre thing that kind of came up like out after the after the race. I was like, this just doesn't make a lot of sense. And AlphaTauri came out and said that it's very disheartening to read some of the language and comments directed towards our team and towards Red Bull Racing's head of strategy, Hannah Schmitz. It just goes on to say that it's just disrespectful to their sportsmanship and how hard they work.
Well, and then it's also disrespectful to, like you were saying, the Red Bull strategists as well, where, like, with Max alongside them, they make the heads-up call to be like, oh, well, let's just go on softs here to get, like, a really big advantage on the restart. I mean, that was a really heads-up race-winning play that made it just impossibly easy for Max at the restart.
Right,
and that's just shitty.
From Mercedes' side too, like they kind of flubbed it similarly to what we saw with Ferrari earlier in the season, where Ferrari didn't pit both Leclerc and double stack with Leclerc and Sainz, causing Leclerc to finish out in 4th place. Basically, the same thing happens with this safety car. Lewis doesn't pit. He stays on the medium tires, overtakes Max for the lead. George comes in for soft tires. Max comes in for soft tires, and all of a sudden, it's just Lewis PTSD.
Yeah.
Like, lap cars can unlap themselves. Max behind on soft.
It's all the memes I saw.
Yeah.
It was like Lewis looking with like the photo kind of transparent with like the war images in the background, just the PTSD.
Hilarious.
Of those. But yeah, Mercedes did not set up Lewis for success there at the end, and I think that's a bummer because, hey, they had really good pace. You never know what happens. Instead of sending Lewis out there to restart on old medium tires where Max is on perfectly fresh soft tires, and got the best jump that I've ever seen on a safety car restart. Like, I don't know if you saw how close he when they crossed the line.
Yeah, that was
He
ridiculous.
was a meter behind Lewis. Like, he was right there, and just Lewis. A lot of people were like, Lewis flubbed that too by starting too early and giving Max the DRS and slipstream in the long straight.
Yeah.
And so that's where I was saying, I feel like even on the hard tires without safety cars and everything, Max with that straight line speed and the slipstream DRS, it was clear that he would have gained and made up that time in those areas at least.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know what it accomplishes to like argue for the same set, because either way he ends up winning the race there. But yeah, I think you're right. Barring the final safety car, he likely still would have had the pace on the hard tires, like you're saying.
Yeah, so it's tough to say, but I think that was Mercedes' biggest strategy, like, error there, was not putting Lewis on the soft tires as well.
Yeah, for sure.
And I mean, he was livid about it afterwards. I mean, him on the radio, he was like, "You guys fucked me," and so it was funny because watching with my friends, I was like, "Oh, I can't wait to hear the post race." Messages crossing the line. I can't wait to hear like his post race interview and everything. Cheery as all can be,
yeah.
And like I get it. It was like in the moment and all, but I expected that fire to come out. But it was kind of neat to see him put it in perspective and be like, oh man, like I think once he probably got some data from the team that's like, you're lapping just as fast as this Red Bull. Like, we just got unfortunate with the safety cars and all, and timing and whatnot. Mm-hmm. Maybe some strategy things that, like, hey, you're right there with them. You can compete again. I think that was his boost, like, end of the race and post-race, where he thought it through and was like, oh, yeah, like, we're here. We're right here. Like, saw George and him get his P2, which was awesome.
Well, and then the one thing he did call out was the bonus to the best pit stop that they had all year. And you even heard him on the radio where he was like, yes, let's go, guys. That was sick. So I think he was really pleased about that. But the one thing that I did really appreciate, and maybe this was just something that I needed to hear personally, as though he was talking directly to me, where he said, I won't apologize for my passion, though. Where he's like, yeah, I don't want to be a dickhead, but he's like, I'm not going to apologize really for being a dickhead, because in the moment, that's how I felt, and I'm not going to apologize for how I feel. So I think there is something powerful in that idea. I do understand the like tempering of that, when he gets to the cameras and the mics and things. But yeah, just I think what we have to remember is that guy's in an impossible situation weekend after weekend and just delivers at an insanely high level.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, if he wants to, get a little loud on a microphone, I think the public should allow it. But mad respect to him for like reining it back in, and again leaving, being in our good graces as fans and just appreciators of good sportsmanship.
Oh yeah, and putting it like all on a positive note and everything for the team. I think they understand him and who he is as well. Sure. Like, he's been with the team for a long time, and so I think that they know that when he comes out like that and comes out hot, that it's like, yeah, he's doing that, but he's doing it for a reason. Like, he knows that we can be better than what we were in this instance, and being one of the best drivers being the best driver ever, and like all of his experience and everything, they have to look at it and be like, okay, this, like, if it's coming from him, it's generally valid criticism. Mm-hmm. So I think that he showed his appreciation well to the team and to everyone, but also, Toto tempered it well in the post-race messages over the radio with like, hey, it is what it is. It's still a good finish. We're still making up points on Ferrari in this instance and everything. And we'll talk about the strategy and whatnot back at the shop. Like, we don't need to do it over the radio. And I think Lewis obviously understands that. So it, I think, was a huge step forward for Mercedes. I think they look great.
Performance-wise, yeah.
And I'm interested to see how they carry it through to Monza next week. But before we talk about that, other drivers that kind of stood out to me, the Alpines getting both cars in the points again. Alonso has now finished in the points the past 10 races, which is huge.
Yeah.
He's climbing up, and even though he has been beaten by Ocon thus far this season in terms of points, I think it's still very tight. I would have to double check myself, but I believe that he is like right there within like 5 points or so.
Okay, yeah, wow. Because I'm pretty sure when I last looked, he was.
So Ocon's 7 points up on Alonso at this point.
Okay. Wow.
So it's still super tight there, and I think that's something that Fernando's really looking at as like another positive. But him just putting in the consistent points finishes has been phenomenal.
Yeah, for Alpine, definitely. And I think just for maybe just like equity in general, I think he's going to be a valuable asset to Aston Martin when he moves there for next year. Because, he's just putting in results right now. It's kind of insane.
I think like just seeing his consistency just again and again now is exciting, because like you don't necessarily know what to expect with a driver who's getting older, who is like in a new team and everything, new team environment, even though he's been with Renault before.
Well, we were thinking last year he was going to be a little slow to start. We were concerned about performance, just from like a very general, minimal info kind of perspective.
Yeah.
But I think just overall he's been really leveling up, and this year just like delivering on a level that is like definitely higher than last year.
Yeah, absolutely. The other driver that just stood out for me was Albon. He finished P12.
Yeah.
A great race from him. Really, really solid performance. But outside of that, I mean, Magnussen had a rough start and then was just playing catch up the rest of the race. Ricardo just kind of got screwed out by the safety cars and just not the best strategy, unfortunately.
Yeah. The only other notable thing was Valtteri getting a DNF as well. Just engine goes on the pit straight, causes some more shenanigans for Carlos, getting the penalty with the overtake and all that. So basically just another point in the Carlos story. But overall, I think it was a pretty fun race. Got a pretty good result. Max wins, George Russell P2, Charles Leclerc 3. But I thought it was pretty fun overall. Yeah,
very very exciting. And then of course we have Monza coming up next, which has
Temple of Speed.
And it's given us two of our most interesting finishes over the past couple years. In 2020, that was Pierre Gasly's win.
Yep.
With AlphaTauri. So that was Pierre, Carlos Sainz, Lance Stroll, top three. A bizarre one. And then this past year was the McLaren 1-2 with Daniel Ricciardo and Lando Norris.
Yeah.
So in the past couple of years, we've had some pretty exciting moments, and I think that that's something that we can hopefully look forward to with Monza this year. I think that it's a fun, exciting, fast track. I think that it will, for Red Bull, and as a Red Bull fan, highlight their strengths. So I think that they'll look strong, but I'm particularly interested in seeing how Mercedes does this coming week, and if Zandvoort maybe suited their car really well to keep pace, or if those steps they've been making forward will also level them a bit more onto that playing field at Monza as well.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really interesting point. And then obviously from the Ferrari camp, we're just looking for consistency. You kind of just want them to finish a race. You don't care what position, just without any.
We care. I would honestly, I'd love to see at least one of the guys on the podium.
Sure.
It's at Monza. It's their home track. It's the Tifosi going to be there. I mean, if they like double DNF, we might see Mattia Bonato like not be around much longer.
That's what I'm saying. I think it's going to be crazy. That's why I'm just hoping for them just to finish the goddamn race.
Definitely hoping for finishes. I'm hoping for a decent finish too, because the Tifosi, I think, are great fans, and I think they deserve to see quality racing from their team, especially when they have not seen it consistently this season. With at least the strategy side of things, I'm hoping that they can kind of put that together, because the drivers are really going out and putting their hearts out there for the team and driving as best they can, and have just kind of ended up unlucky.
Yeah, and it would be such a heartbreaker too, because like this year the Ferrari has been the best that it has been in recent memory, but it's still such an up and down season even within that context. So there is still that possibility for it to be just a total heartbreaker weekend for Ferrari, or it could just be a blowout with how up and down they've been. But yeah, overall, I think just Red Bull is going to be strong. I think, we'll see how strong the AlphaTauris are. I'm kind of looking at the Alpines as well. I think they may prove to look pretty good. But, overall, I think just these triple headers are just keeping it jam-packed with action.
Yeah, it's going to be very exciting. We've got just week after week of races right now, so I'm looking forward to it, and I guess we'll have to wait and see how that turns out.
Yep.
But moving forward into League of Legends, we had the LCS upper bracket finals, and did you watch the EGTL series as well, or did you just watch the C900 Thieves?
No, I just watched the C900 Thieves and then checked into the other scores. But just watched the main series, and
cool.
Coming into it, it's kind of crazy how 5th seed Cloud9 comes in, first takes down EG, and then just makes a mess out of 100 Thieves. Obviously, there was some moments. It was like pretty long, like much longer games than we've seen. The first one, like 43 minutes. I think the second game was, like 38, 39 minutes
36,
or so.
Yeah.
So really getting up there as far as like meta length, which is indicative of somewhat competitive teams, but obviously as the season went on, that kind of fell away a little bit more.
Yeah, I think that the length of games increasing emphasizes like other team aspects other than which team has the strongest laners and then can just snowball super hard. It gives the opportunity for teams, I think, like Cloud9 that have some pretty solid later game objective control and warding and whatnot and team fighting. It allows them to kind of, and just like in terms of the champions that are being played, you're scaling up for a lot longer. You're putting yourself in a position to be strong in those late game team fights. So that early objective control, like Cloud9 had in game one with the dragons, getting the dragon soul and everything, I think definitely emphasizes some of their strengths. And so I'm not shocked to see them there, but I also did expect still them to be the like underdog in both of those matchups with EG as well as TL.
Yeah, definitely. I think they kind of got off lucky here in game one. Cloud9 did. They picked the Kennen top lane with Aatrox on the other side. Not really like commenting on the matchup at all. That's gonna be brutal if Fudge ever looks to 1v1 that Aatrox. So definitely like not looking to lane. But they did get off kind of early with 100 Thieves not using double
exhaust. We saw that in the JDG Top Esports series where the double exhaust just shut down the Kennen. They were also playing the Kennen with Wukong as well. So even if your timers are... So you have the option to use both of them in the same fight on 2 different carries, or you can offset, so you always have access to an exhaust for the Kennen ult. There were a couple of moments where Fudge was shut down with the Yuumi exhaust, but man, he was dealing some damage towards the late game. And what's interesting, their team comps reflect very similar to, I would say, like LCK drafts.
Yeah.
It feels like definitely not the drafts that were played in the JDG Top Esports games. Those were like pretty aggressive.
I think that reflected a bit more towards like the EGTL matchups I was watching. Bjergsen playing a ton of the Talia, which was is one of those champions that I think is really interesting to see. And so that was the main thing that I really did want to touch on from that other series and watching that.
Sure.
But the Talia was super impactful, and we've seen it in like the JDG and in the LPL coming out in prominence. And I think that the use of that, it does lead to a bit more aggressive because you're able to utilize the Talia ult for objective control and kind of fight at every different objective and utilize that. So these team comps definitely were a bit more LCK, a little more macro, not team fight heavy based. So I definitely agree with kind of the setup that both teams had.
But yeah, just thinking about game one, long game, scaling up. It took a while for Cloud9 to like really ramp up, but it was interesting. They actually get a catch onto Someday towards the end of the game. I think they were going for the Dragon Soul, or maybe it was like Dragon Point or something, and they catch out the Someday, and then they are just able to win the 4v5 with this just pushing the advantage. So Cloud9 takes game one, and then in game two, talk about the Talia. This was just the Abadaga show. He had a 4-man flick, and then I think it was a full 5-man flick on the team.
Yeah, it does so much damage if you can set it up well. And with their comp, I mean, they had Poppy with Closer. I believe he stopped at least one of the Ornhorns with his block from the dash. So they kind of shut that down. And just in general, like, Cloud9's team comp needs to kind of get into... They don't have a ton of range. You have to be in decently close, except for Aphelios, really. So with that, you're putting yourself in a position, and they were able to corral C9 very well in a couple of those instances and make some huge plays with the Talia.
Yeah, and I just think the wall came in so huge in so many different opportunities. Like, the neutral objectives, Cloud9 just was not allowed to go anywhere near them. I think this was Berserker's worst game that I've seen in, like, forever.
Yeah.
He was barely even in the game, but even if he tried to show up, he just has a Gwen, a Poppy, the Amumu. Like, he has no way to get away from the Amumu. Right. And Huhi was so keen in this game to just like flash ult then bandage. Like, he was doing a bunch of like creative ways to start the fight. Yeah. So Berserker was just never safe, but like he was a non-factor in the game.
Yeah, and even in instances where he could have been, there was one in mid where he had an ultimate that could have hit like 4 people and just whiffed and didn't hit anyone.
Yeah, that was brutal.
And that was just the way that 100 Thieves was like, oh, let's turn and fight now, and kind of just push that through. So really solid on them. I did also like that they were banning out the LeBlanc versus Jensen in both the first games, along with in game 2, the Zillion. They kind of pushed him down his pick priority onto that Anivia pick, but I like the concept. It's just they didn't get enough going to be able to like kind of use that to snowball and get really strong. But into game 3, you see Cloud9 kind of defaulting back to a little bit of that comfort, the LeBlanc getting the Gnar in the top lane, which I do really like the Gnar versus the Aatrox matchup. I thought that allowed Fudge to kind of get some good priority in the lane, to be able to kind of add additional pressure around the map, along with like the Zeri is always going to get strong in the bot lane, especially with the Lulu. But Jensen was my kind of big story from the game.
Yeah, I think it was his roams that really opened up the map in the early game. He had a quick roam to the top side to get that lane rolling, and then I'm pretty sure he moved quickly down into the bottom lane and helped out the Berserker and Sven lane. And then from there's like a 2.5k gold advantage. They just don't let you get any wards in their jungle, and it felt pretty like clinical and clean from that perspective. There were a couple of really good ults from Fudge. I think his Gnar is one of the more impressive, and maybe it's just the way Cloud9 like team fights around him, but they seem to be fighting well around the Gnar, and obviously it's just a really meta pick. It's one of the strongest team fighting choices that you can pick for the top lane, barring Ornn maybe. But yeah, it's I think it's a really good pick, really beefy front line. Him and Poppy are just never going to die at a certain point, so
and
I really like
especially with the Lulu there too. You have the polymorph to be able to potentially shut down any sort of someone getting on top of either of them. You have the Lulu also that has the ultimate that can just kind of cause more. A Nard jumps in, ults, and then gets like
the wild
Lulu
growth.
ulted. Like that is just brutal. So really nice picks from Cloud9 there, and I think they, like you said, it was a very clinical, clean game, which it might have been I think it's one of the cleaner ones that we've seen through the playoffs, with just a team controlling it, at least in the LCS.
And like a mid laner controlling it. It was fully Jensen's agency to roam top lane, get that kill, roam bottom lane, get that kill, and just set his team up. So yeah, I think really well played in game 3 from Cloud9. And then in game 4, it was just as long as the first game in the series. But overall, I think the team comp was pretty weak from 100 Thieves. I was not a fan of the Seraphine in the mid lane. I just think there's like better things that you can be doing overall. And then it seems like Cloud9 got 100 Thieves a little bit caught off guard with the Neela pick. But yeah, talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think that they did, and we haven't really seen Neela in the LCS much, and so seeing her come out, and especially with the Yuumi, like that seems like currently at least the best support for that pick. I think it kept it pretty strong in the 2v2, but like you said, the Seraphine, I just don't think scales super well, and this ended up being a much longer game. It was a much more or just a much slower game in general. I feel like both teams were in the match point scenario, while 100 Thieves kind of pulled back their aggression and tempo, and so thereby slowed down the game, which just plays into Cloud9's hands. I mean, Fudge just gets stronger and stronger to be able to split push and put pressure on all different sides of the map. He was going top lane, he was going bot lane.
And that was what they used for their counter pick, was giving Fudge whatever choice of matchup he wanted. He chose the Camille into Aatrox, ends up going 5-1 and 8 on the game, just being just a monster.
Yeah, and with the scaling that you get from the Azir as well in the mid lane, it just gets kind of out of control. Once you get later, you can put a lot of pressure on the Baron, even though they didn't end up getting either of them, because 100 Thieves kind of forced the issue there, that they forced the issue and then lost the team fights
Yeah.
right after.
Yeah.
And that was kind of the coffin being sealed a little bit, the last nail there, because they just weren't able to. They were kind of desperate Baron takes, and because they knew they were behind and wanted to try and shake something up and just couldn't really get much of anything out afterwards. I think the first time they ended up with maybe only 2 or 3 people with the Baron afterwards, and the second time I think they had 1 maybe, if anyone, left after the second Baron fight.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, like the Baron, it's not the team fighting buff. It's not the we get this, we kill you. You get a large influx of gold, so you get a lot of items, and then what it helps you do is then push the turrets, right? It helps you get objectives,
Right.
knock something down in their base to like give you a lasting tempo advantage,
Yes.
right? But it doesn't fucking matter if your whole team is dead, because you can't push with it then. There's
Well,
no
yeah.
tempo advantage.
And
So
if you're
right.
stuck in the river there, right around the Baron pit, you're not getting any boosted minions who are throwing out auto attacks or anything. Scuttle's not helping you. There's no there's no savior there.
So it almost feels like not just desperate, like just wait a couple more minutes and do that same fight at an Elder or a Dragon Soul. Like then it's a lasting buff. Then you get an increase in that fight advantage right there. So yeah, I think just some questionable decisions.
Yeah, and I mean, at the same time, it's not fully their fault that they did have to fight there. Cloud9 forced the issue and didn't let them just take it and back out. But either way, that's kind of why you don't want to necessarily force that when you are down and all. You have to be very tactical and like planned about how you sneak a Baron or wait for a number of people to make a bad recall or something. There has to be something from Cloud9's side that gives you the opportunity to take that, as opposed to just like, oh, let's take it now and see what happens. And that's kind of more how it felt.
Yeah, and that's like the territory that you get into where they'll, start saying flips and 50-50s and whatever the fuck. But yeah, it didn't really go well for them. I just want to comment, I think Azir is hilarious after his first spell rotation is done, when he is just standing there pointing and it's just soldiers just thwacking. Like he's not doing a whole lot.
Oh,
There's
no.
not a lot of animation, and it is just funny after a while. He's just pointing. He's like, that one, that one, that one. It's amazing.
Yeah, and a good pick, fun to watch. And the first rotation is always really exciting too.
Well, it's
because
flashy as hell.
those slide-ins and ults to lock people up and everything. But yeah, after that, he is just kind of like, sand soldiers, this is what you're here for.
Yep.
Get them, boys.
Yep, he's giving out the orders. But yeah, we saw, we just saw Cloud9 just kind of roll over 100 Thieves. We thought it was going to be maybe a little bit more of a contested matchup. And yeah, the games went longer, but honestly, Cloud9 looks like they just have a good understanding of how to play League of Legends right now. Like their picks are really good. Their tempered aggression is pretty good. They're playing as a team overall and just doing it a little bit better. A 3-1 for Cloud9 is pretty good.
Yeah, they look super comfortable, and I think that bodes well for them in the finals now.
Yeah.
Making it to finals again after, I think, Spring Split 2021 being the last time they were there. I know it's not that long ago, but 2 splits in between without them making it to the finals. I think it's exciting as a fan for them to be back.
For sure.
On the other side, in the lower bracket with 100 Thieves EG, one note for their matchup coming up is that Danny will not be with the team for their losers bracket finals and finals in Chicago. He is going to be taking a mental health type break, and Kyle will be there fill in the bot laner role. I saw a lot of positive support around that, which was exciting. Double Lift came out and said that like mental health is super important and was like applauding that. So I definitely think that that's good that they've taken the time. I think at this point they've qualified for Worlds. They know they're going to be there. Let him have the time he needs to hopefully be able to reset and kind of work on whatever it is or start feeling better in whatever way to the point that he'll be able to perform and compete during the World Championships. I think that from EG's side as well, just allowing him to have that space and time is like a huge like positive from the team side, that they're like, yeah, this is one of our best players and we want him to be healthy in every part of his self.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good thing overall. I think it's a good precedent to set for just like teams and large orgs in general, saying that like, yeah, we value that aspect of our players. I think it's really important. However, just from a spectator note, it is somewhat apparent, and this could be just personal bias, my own headcanon, whatever. He does often appear very nervous on stage. I don't know if that's just his face, his posture, whatever, but I hope he figures out whatever he's got to figure out, because I imagine Worlds is going to be a different monster if they're like on stage.
Yeah.
Even if there's like any element of a live crowd. I know a lot of events right now are doing like limited in person or whatever it is, but even any amount of screaming and yelling and excitement, it has made even the best players nervous. So
Yeah.
you just hope that he comes into that ready and well prepared, and it is kind of dope that his team is putting like that much support behind it and is saying like, hey, yeah, this is what we're here for, to help out. So yeah, I just hope he comes in strong for the World's run, because my God, they're going to need him, because like you said, he is one of their best players along with JoJo.
Yep.
And I mean, if your AD is not putting up numbers on a stage where you're going to be up against fucking Ruler, Jackie Love, like just name any other AD carry that's playing right now. I mean, it's going to be some hot competition there this year.
It definitely is, and I think that maybe it's somewhat due to the fact that Danny kind of came into his professional career during a time where there were not crowds, where you were not playing on stage. You were in a comfortable environment of what you are used to scrimming in and whatnot. So hopefully he'll be able to kind of turn that or this experience and all into some positives, work on some ways that if that is what is stressing him out and where his anxiety or whatever issues are coming from, to be able to work through them and hopefully be prepared for Worlds. But if not, looking forward to seeing how Kyle does, and hopefully he is a suitable sub in. Sounds like from what they were saying, he's been working with the team for quite a while. And so I will be rooting for Kyle in his debut games to hopefully fill in well for Danny and take that spot.
Yeah, it's a tough spot for both players to be in. You don't want to fill in for a long standing. You don't want to be out. You want to play all your games. So yeah, we just wish him the best of luck.
Definitely. And so from that, moving from LCS and kind of the final two matchups that we'll have over to the LEC, we watched the G2 versus Rogue series. Yeah, it was a rough one. I just G2, man. G2 in World's form is
Playoff
just
caps,
another
baby.
is another beast. They did not at any point of that series look like they were going to lose.
No, there were like some moments early game where they just got killed, ganked and gotten killed, but yet overall G2 had insane control over the game overall. Their picks seem to be really strong. Their just team play seemed to be really strong. But yeah, I think Caps and Yankos are who you want on your team.
Yeah, I mean, they're both veteran players who have been around for a while. They both were just ready to roll. And, I mean, they're playing some different picks than what we're seeing, at least in the LCS. The Jarvan keeps coming out in LEC, which is, like, interesting. I know that we've seen it periodically in other regions, but I just don't quite feel like it has as much oomph as I would like it to. But
sure. I think they just really like the very consistent, guaranteed engage. The wall interacts with a lot of champions.
It does.
Especially, like, you know, your immobile AD carries are still being played to a certain degree.
Definitely. And like people without dashes and whatnot.
Yeah.
And so it's not that it's a bad pick. I just think that I feel like there are still some really strong jungle picks. The Wukong's obviously a huge one, but gets passed up in game one. Yankos plays the Jarvan, and he, like you said, he and Caps look super strong. They also get Broken Blade ahead and kind of just win all across the map. The Seraphine and the Senna in the bot lane, very strong together. Much better than the Seraphine mid lane that we saw in the C9 series.
Yeah.
So
yeah, she definitely does better when she's poking with somebody else. Where there's two champions that you're worried about, dodging skill shots becomes a lot harder. The Seraphine Senna duo just spits out a lot of damage, a lot of poke, and it just keeps coming because the cooldowns are quite low. So yeah, it was interesting. I think in the early game, G2 was able to kind of crack open the mid lane, picking on Larson a little bit on that Talia pick, and then they really only took good fights where, you know, they would wait a little while in between their engagements, pick their pushes, and they only took the fights that they knew they were going to win and sealed it up in game one.
Yeah, they had a really strong game one. I think, like you were saying, with the Seraphine and the Senna, the ranged matchup and all, along with the Seraphine ult, I think also benefits them hugely with the Aatrox and Jarvan being able to get in there onto the carries that they're looking to. But they just kind of ran through Rogue in game one. Game two, Caps on the Varus. That was one of the bigger kind of interesting picks that we got to see. We haven't seen the mid lane Varus in quite some time, and bringing that out in the matchup versus the Azir, where you have the range, I thought it was a smart pick. You're kind of just looking to go even and not give any advantages.
Well, and then you get your late game, or like your mid and late game poke around neutral objectives is just disgusting. Like, Caps was knocking off people's heads. Like, he was just chunking their health bar so much.
And with like an AP type build and everything too, it really chunks hard if you get the ult down on someone and get those stacks to proc. It's brutal.
Yeah, so he was doing a decent amount of damage. I think what was interesting was how much those fights relied on that poke. Both teams back and forth trying to just start a fight, which sometimes was quite difficult for both sides. There was a lot of kite back from Rogue, a lot of kite back from G2.
Yeah, there's not really any like without the Jarvan, there's not a really strong, consistent engage because you do have the Azir ultimate, you have the Xin who can push people away. You have the Sivir to run away and the Yuumi ult to like lock people up. So you have a lot of peel back. You do also have a lot of engage, but on the other side, you similarly have very similar disengage. The Seraphine ult works similarly to the Yuumi. The Varus ult as well. And so you really are kind of in a battle of wits to some extent of when and where to use those abilities and ults. And once again, G2 kind of was able to figure it out in a very, very tight game. They get a lot of good objective control to get the Dragon Soul, which I think those extra stats were just immensely helpful to them later on in the game, because even at the end, it was only a 2,000 gold difference. I mean, those stats just on top of it being that tight were a nice boost kind of at the end of the game.
Yeah, and then it really helped. I know I'm not sure how or why Comp was positioned where he was, but it was actually a mispositioning from him that like really cracked the game open for G2. They got the pick on him, were able to clean up a couple more kills, and then just teleported straight into the bottom lane. So what could have been a pretty competitive game there at the end, it actually seemed like a misplay from the AD carry player of Rogue to set them back another game and then put them facing, match point here in game 3.
Yeah, and game 3 was just through and through a stomp. I mean, G2 picked super aggressive picks because they had a 2-0 lead. You've got Silas in the mid lane, the Yone in the top lane, the Draven. And just all across the board, they were able to get advantages, get leads, and it was not long for Rogue in that one.
No, it was not long for Rogue at all. A couple of like strategy notes I had where Rogue had prio on the Rift Herald where they let G2 just take the dragons, and you just had a really sick roam from Targamas up into the mid lane. They get a really good pick on the Azir, get that kind of lane rolling, and then the last note I have here is the dragon fight of 15 minutes where Broken Blade gets a 4-man ult onto the rest of Rogue, and in that moment I was literally like, oh, that's just good game. And I just scrubbed through the rest of the video, and very quickly you just see them like killing the Nexus. I was like, oh, that is just game over.
Yeah.
It is such a disgusting ult. And really, like, it just goes to show how much impact these top lane champions have and these players have, where they have some of the strongest ults available to them. I'm thinking like the Camille's, the Gwen's, the Ornns, the Nars, the what is his name? Yone. Like, it is so fun to have such playmaking ability just in the champions in the game in general. I think that's just kind of what makes it exciting to watch. But yeah, Broken Blade was fucking huge in that moment. It was insane.
Well, and the other side of it is like you have lanes that lose early in every single lane.
Yeah.
Like the Yone beats Ornn in the top lane early. Like, he's just stronger. He has more damage. The Silas in the mid lane, even though you are at range, Silas is so strong. His healing and everything that he gets if he gets onto the Azir is just stupid. Again, with the Draven and the Rakan in the bot lane, so much damage and so much like safety that you get from the Rakan early on. You really don't have anything that loses hard. And even though Rogue had just immensely better late game scaling, you can't get to late game if every lane loses and loses hard, which is kind of what happened. So G2 moving on to the finals in the LEC there, and Rogue dropping down into the lower bracket. We've got still a couple of matchups to go in the LEC, but so far it has been kind of the G2 show running through.
Yeah, now we're just waiting for the results of Fnatic versus Rogue. Fnatic took down Mad 3-1 in their round 3 game. So now we're just waiting on the result of Rogue versus Fnatic to see who G2 will face in the finals, and then that should decide, or that should give us all of the EU teams then who will be going to Worlds.
Well, and so we do have it actually because they get 4. So G2, Rogue, Fnatic, and Mad are the teams that are all going to Worlds.
Gotcha. It just matters what seed they are.
Right. And so the weird part is, so Mad Lions, and this was something that Kadrill tweeted, Mad Lions is going to Worlds to the play-in stage. They have won no best of 5s this year for the entire year. They lost 2 best of 5s here in the LEC playoffs. And then LNG had been in their 7th best of 5 at the time to qualify for the last LPL spot. Mm-hmm. But just the fact that Mad can make it with no... I think... Every year we've seen tweaks to these playoff systems, to the qualifying systems in the different regions and everything. And so it's hard to know something's broken until something broken happens to it. Like the adage, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah.
You don't have to until all of a sudden a team that has not been able to win a single best of 5 in their own region goes to Worlds to be like, maybe we need to figure out a different way to do this. Like, I like how in the LCS although we are sending one less team to Worlds, I mean, it's the top 3 from Summer Split that are going. It's the 3 best teams in the summer that are going to make it. Your spring split counts in terms of like qualifications, I think, for playoffs and whatnot. Yeah. But in the grand scheme of things, like, you want to be sending your 3 best teams to Worlds, and Mad Lions has unfortunately not shown that they're that, but they've just done enough to kind of make it
Yeah. I see what you're saying.
Above the rest.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting format thing. I think that it does warrant some potential reworks, but we've got the 4 teams for LEC, and now just like you said, waiting on kind of the seeds and how that shakes out. LCK, we had the finals between Gen.G and T1. Unfortunately, similarly to the G2 Rogue series, not too exciting of a or not that it wasn't exciting, but a very lopsided series with the 3-0 for Gen.G.
Yeah, and we covered the final last week, the Gen.G T1 final. But just to comment on it, yeah, it was not the LCK finals that we would always or usually expect.
Yeah, so we have that finals, and I guess we are just waiting on the regional LCK to determine the last Worlds standings and whatnot. I'm not sure if they've all shaken out with that yet.
I'm pretty sure we're about to find out. Yep, DRX beat Live Sandbox.
So, yeah, so we'll have from the LCK, we've got Damwon Gaming Kia. We've got DRX making it to the play-in. So, Damwon winning the upper bracket qualification match, essentially, against Live Sandbox, and then Live losing to DRX in the second, like the losers bracket finals.
Yeah,
that was the second qualification. So so now we have all 4 teams for Worlds from the LCK with Gen.G, T1, Damwon Gaming Kia, and DRX going. So I think pretty similar to what we've seen from the LCK recently. I don't know if
well, this will be Gen.G's first time as that roster going, which is pretty sick.
That's
like
true.
We get to see the up and coming best player in the world actually, like, we'll see if it stands up, because right now I think the contested conversation is is Chovy the better player than Faker? Because right now, I think in a lot of people's minds, Faker still holds that legacy position, and they're in a position right now where you may still want to call him the best player in the world. Whether he is or not, I'm not saying. But there is strong evidence that says Chovy is the up-and-coming best player in the world right now.
Yeah.
And he makes it to Worlds with his team and is put in a position where he actually gets to show up and defend that. Do you remember I was thinking about this the other day, there was a year, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, there was an 80 carry player out of China. I think his name was Huan Feng.
Yeah, Huan Feng.
From the semifinals
he
and
was
the finals.
Weibo Gaming's. So he was in the he was LPL, or maybe he was one of the, like, I forget if where exactly. Well, I can look at his thing. Right
Either
here.
way,
He's right here.
all I'm saying is he was coming in as a highly rated 80 carry player.
Yes,
and
with,
just did nothing that whole tournament.
Yeah, I think that was when he was on Suning. He made it to Worlds and just
Gotcha.
did not he had great performances leading up to it, but
Right.
didn't afterwards. And so I think right now the conversation in my mind is, so Faker, it's kind of, you can relate it to F1. Faker is the GOAT. Michael Schumacher, when he was driving for Mercedes at the time, was the GOAT, but while he was on Mercedes, he was not the best driver on the grid.
Right.
Faker, the GOAT, currently still performing with T1, but not necessarily the best mid laner out there in the world at this point in time. He can still be the GOAT of all time,
right.
and over looking at a career, the best mid laner of all time without being currently the best mid laner in the world. And I really do think that competition is, we're looking at Chovy, we're looking at Rookie, we're looking at Knight, and we're looking at JoJo Pune.
No, son, no.
Oh, I thought I'd get you with that. So, but no, I think Chovy, Rookie, Knight. Those
If I
are,
just started shaking my head like,
those are going to be the guys
God.
that we're really looking at Worlds, and I think right now Chovy is definitely the standout coming from the LCK. Not that Faker's been playing bad, but he has not been the definitive best mid laner in the LCK, in my opinion, from what I've been watching. But I think Chovy definitely has reason to say he's the best mid laner at least this split in the LCK
Sure.
going into Worlds.
Yeah, but it's going to be tough. It's going to be very tough to say that if Faker wins a fourth fucking title.
Oh, I mean,
this year.
I can say it right now all I want, and we'll see what happens at
I'm rooting
Worlds.
for them so hard. Like, you have no idea.
Yeah,
I want T1
no,
to win so bad.
I would love to see that. I think that
That would be
the nostalgia would
dominant.
be.
No, not even for nostalgia.
Well,
like,
I mean,
as a
like,
legacy.
as a
4
legacy,
world
but-
championships would be dominant.
It would be, but I think that I don't know if they have the team to win Worlds. So, like, my rooting is almost based on the nostalgia of, like, this is the best team of all time, and it would be that another notch in the
Yeah.
like, I don't even know what that.
Like in the storyline or whatever.
Yeah, to solidify them even more, especially as teams have started to kind of catch up in terms of world championships and whatnot. So it would definitely speak to the legacy in a big way.
Because they're not even the best team at the tournament right now.
Right.
Yeah.
They're not, and that doesn't mean that they're not in contention to win. They're still probably a top 4 team in the world.
Yeah, but that loss to Genji, and I think this is what we can take away in this conversation from that series. the series with Genji showed that they have a lot of holes, and their draft may be one of the biggest holes where they think they're like getting over their opponent on something, and they're just not.
No, and I think that's something though that will be improved upon, because draft, I think, is the easiest thing to fix. Like, all you have to do is be like, oh, well, actually, this is the best way to play, and in these matchups, we need to go for this type of comp, and you can round that out much better, and you have a huge sample size looking across the world at different matchups in 1v1s and whatnot, that you can really like get a good idea of where you're at without needing to like completely change your play style or your team cohesion, or there's someone who's a weak link.
No, I don't think it's any
this
of
is
that.
like
I think it was purely draft.
This is a much easier fix in the grand scheme of things. So leading into Worlds, it will be interesting to see kind of how they are able to fix some of their issues. Maybe it will be through scrims, maybe through the round robin stage, but nonetheless, definitely a top team to watch in terms of potential world champion contenders, and just fun and exciting team to watch. But Genji as well, like the talent that you have coming out from their side is just,
they're dripping.
It's incredible. They win and they win lanes, but they push every advantage that they get so well and so consistently that they're able to really just control the pace of the game through small advantages. And that bodes well, because if other teams are playing at a different pace than what their team comp is supposed to, or what their team is planning for, then you're going to be on the back foot. But getting over into the LPL, we had the LPL finals with Top Esports and JD Gaming. So this was the kind of the rematch, going to another best of 5 between the two, from the upper bracket semifinals to the finals. And JDG came out swinging in game 1. They looked super, super strong. The Zeri really got rolling as the game got going on, but Kanavi was just, throughout the series, like the linchpin for JD Gaming. His Wukong in game 1 was just huge in terms of propelling them forward. And he really like set the tempo early, and kind of shut down Tian on the Vi pick.
Yeah, big time. I don't think Tian had a very strong game. Didn't have a great time trying to navigate around Kanavi. He was just everywhere, and especially him and Yagao using that Lissandra to roam, use it as like a pick tool, get a couple of lockdowns. They were pretty on point with their team comp, and like you said, I think Kanavi was a big point. What Top Esports, and this is what I was talking about, you had Knight with the summoning spellbook there on Top Esports, and he was who was bringing in the secondary exhaust with that spellbook against the Kennen Zeri comp that JD Gaming had, but it just was not enough. I think Top Esports made some interesting neutral trades to try and stay in the game, keep the gold like not terrible, but yeah, overall JD Gaming just came out in game 1.
And that's what I felt like it was kind of. So it's the difference from what we see in LCK. In LCK, I feel like we see teams trading objectives a lot more neutrally. You see teams, this team is getting the Rift Herald and going top. Well, we'll take Dragon and go bot, and like kind of separating. Where from Top Esports and JD Gaming, like you're seeing them fight over every objective and still kind of trade back and forth. But Top Esports focused the Dragons heavily early on. They really just weren't able to get enough gold through that to kind of boost themselves up, and started falling behind as JD Gaming was taking those opportunities to aggressively take turrets and pressure points of the map that were going to give them gold, as opposed to trading tower for tower or dragon for Rift Herald. They're like, oh, you want to take dragon? Well, we'll take a turret in top and mid lane and push those advantages. And it just got to a point that top couldn't keep up, really.
Yeah, and unfortunately, this was, I think, the only game where Top Esports did not have their starting top laner. Usually it's Wayward in the top lane, so they had a sub in game 1. So I think that was a little bit of a weak point, especially against 369. I think he is a strong top laner. So yeah, I think that matchup likely could have gone better. Likely not the story of the game, but just wanted to comment on it.
Definitely.
Going into game 2, we see somewhat different team comps. We see JD Gaming looking for the Scion priority, and then we see the Leona Sivir, which is pretty cool from Top Esports side.
Yeah, and the Leona just gives so much control of team fights. You have the ability to disengage so well with the solar flare. You also have that stun and engage potential, and especially against a Zeri, that's huge. But I think the focus on getting Wayward ahead in the top lane really was one of the keys to kind of putting them in a good position later on. The Scion got to a point where you're seeing teleports into the bot lane brush for dragons and everything, and he's just being immediately jumped on by 4 members of Top Esports, soloed out, killed, and then they're turning and fighting the rest of the team. The engages that we were seeing from the Scion just were not what they needed to be because he was far enough behind that he didn't have the stats to survive. So that was definitely an unfortunate aspect of that pick, but also just a big props to Top Esports with how they were able to put that behind so far when the other lanes really were relatively even.
Yeah, definitely. There was, I think, some strong team fighting from the Gnar and Wayward, I think, in the mid and the late game to just kind of make any goal differences kind of irrelevant with one 4-man ult against the wall. He was just destroying fights. There was a little bit of a dip in tempo there for Top Esports to the degree that I actually thought JD Gaming was going to come back here in the second game, but with some pretty crazy late game movements. These teams are so willing to just like push into your base while you're in theirs.
Oh yeah.
It got tenuous there towards the end.
Definitely. They really do have that willingness to trade objectives and everything, and so
and like inhibs and inhib turrets and shit, and that's like crazy.
Yeah, it's super exciting. And so leading into game 3, just a super back and forth series. I was not real excited just about the lack of damage output that Top Esports picked. That was really the key to me was their draft. The Sejuani, the Renekton has some damage in the top lane, but especially later in the game is not going to match the damage you're getting from the Gangplank. And the Swain in the mid lane, like you have the ability to live for a while, but you're really putting your eggs in the Jackie Love basket on the Zeri.
Oh, yeah.
And all that it takes is Kanavi with some ridiculous long-range engage, flash, punch, ults onto the Zeri, and all of a sudden your biggest source of damage is just gone from the team fight.
Yeah, there was... Well... To be fair, I do believe Top Esports would have won this game. I think Knight was kind of a monster on the Swain. The scoreline doesn't really speak to just how, like, he was demanding so much space in the team fights. There was a moment in, like, the blue side where he was literally just pushing 3 people out with his ult. Like, they could not walk by him. So there is a degree to which I think if Yagao was not so disgusting on the Ari, like he hit like 3 key charms on the Jackie Love that should not have connected, in the sense that like he was way over positioning himself to get those charms to like put himself in range for damage. And I really think it was Kanavi and Ari, or Kanavi and Yagao on Ari, that really saved the game for JD Gaming, because Jackie Love was, if he was not dying, they were not going to lose the game.
Yeah,
right?
And definitely. And I think that that's the biggest thing. But, like, I think from a pick standpoint, the Swain, even though it does demand a lot of space in team fights and kind of forces you to play around it, I do think that there are other potential picks that you could have a better matchup and just play a different style that you still have good protection from the Amumu and the Sejuani for the Zeri, and gives you more damage potential, because I just personally, I like contingencies. The idea of we're going all in on this plan, and if it doesn't work out, we lose, is not a good plan in my mind. Because things don't go the way that you expect them to in a lot of ways. And so I think that was my biggest issue. I think that Knight played the Swain well, but
they used it well, but I think I'd agree with you that, mostly there are better picks. I think it fit decent in this team comp here, and it looked okay in the game. But overall, I think it was just Yagao and Kanavi just working so fucking hard to kill Jackie Love, who, by the way, is playing insane right now.
Oh, he looks like an absolute maniac. Like they're putting all the eggs in his basket because he deserves to have them there to some extent. Like that, he is winning them games consistently. He is someone. He and Wayward both right now are 2 players that are, when they are given the opportunity to carry, I feel like have done a very good job of doing so. And I not that I think that other players of the team like Knight or Tian can't, but those players have tended to take kind of more facilitator roles recently. Especially we're seeing the Lissandra pick out of Knight in Game 4. We're seeing him really similarly facilitate Jackie Love, being able to get those picks. I did think that JD Gaming really had a number of moments overextending in this game. The Pantheon ults that were just kind of leaving Kanavi out in no man's land. And
the pick in general was like kind of underwhelming as well, regardless of how well he played it.
I agree.
Didn't do a whole lot. I think Tien just had the run of the jungle in the early game. Tien literally just did whatever he wanted. Kanavi was just like busy farming. Tien had like a kill in the mid lane and an assist in the top lane, and he was down like 5 or 6 farm. I think the early game big time went to Tien in that sense.
Yeah, and the Gnar Renekton matchup, I think, leans it leans towards Gnar in the early game, and then of course in the late game, if the Gnar's ahead, he is just so impactful with his ultimates and everything jumping in. They really came out strong kind of from all areas, and Knight facilitated a lot with the Lissandra to allow them to get picks and opportunities to just kind of take objectives and control areas of the map very well. Just overall a solid game from Top Esports in Game 4.
Yeah, I think just the one pick that has been growing on me is the Renata Glask. Her ult, the hostile takeover, I'm being seen used by these Chinese and Korean players just to very interesting effect. You see the one player flashing over the Nexus to ult the fountain, so anybody spawning would just attack each other, so they have more time hitting the Nexus. I thought that was like really heads up. We see him using it like to prevent the like the back members of a fight from coming in, like isolating one of the frontline members. So it's just an ult that is proving to have a lot of varied uses, both offensive and defensive. The more we're seeing it, especially in these best of fives, just at how much of a tool it is for your team comp. It's just super interesting, and I think we see Mark playing it here pretty well.
Yeah, and you have to have a really talented support on it too, because if you hit your own players, they are in on the melee too, and you don't necessarily want that.
Right.
So you really do almost have to get flank angles similarly to a top laner from a support pick to be able to go in. Like, you don't need that typically from a lot of supports. You can flash ult with an Amumu and you're just hitting whoever you're on top of,
right.
Or you can with a Yumi or a Seraphine or a Sona, you can just throw it through everyone and it doesn't affect your team other than the fact that you're running at them.
Yeah.
Like, so it's definitely a pick that you have to play very specifically and anticipate a lot of things, and Mark played it super, super well. And then leading into game 5, we see Kanavi with the Belveth pick coming out,
Which did nothing.
weird pick. But
I didn't even understand what the champion was doing in the game. It's got a dash, it can ult, and I don't know, man.
Yeah, I just don't know if it was the right pick. It wasn't
the wrong one because they won.
Yeah, I just don't think that that's why. I mean, they did utilize, because it does have some early game potential to gank and some strong early ganks. I think that was the only big value that it provided, because it allowed them to get other lanes ahead and everything. And I mean, it did work out, but it is very high risk, high reward of a pick, because if you don't utilize its early potential like that, then you are going to end up with a pick that's not going to be impactful late game.
And then you're just 4v5.
Right. And so fortunately they were able to get it rolling, but I question it, but it did work out.
Yeah, my note here says just need more data, but it didn't look that great. But it ended for a series and matchup that we've been enjoying since the semifinals. It ended in quite an uninspired way, with them just getting right in there and finishing it.
Yeah, it wasn't the most exciting, but again, you don't always have to be exciting to win.
Sure.
And a win is a win. It's a 1-0 in the win column for JDG, and in this case, won them the series, won them the LPL summer playoffs.
Yeah.
So big props to them. I will say that I hope that they don't utilize that pick if it's not going to be super strong.
Yeah, I doubt we're going to see a whole lot.
But maybe it's a comfort pick or something, and it did work out, so you can't say too much about it.
Right.
But nonetheless, definitely a good series and excitement from the LPL. So we have JD Gaming, of course, coming out on top there, and then top Esports in that second position. So going to Worlds from the LPL, we've got
pretty sure it's JD Gaming, Top Esports, RNG, and Edward Gaming.
So I think you're correct. So yeah, JD Gaming, Top Esports, Edward Gaming, and then what was the last one you said?
And then Royal beat, I forget who they beat, but they got
they'll be
into the play-in stage. Yeah. Which is super exciting. I know we were talking previously on the pod that the current spring split champions in China would not make it to Worlds.
Yeah,
there was a possibility of it, but they played for their life.
Yeah, there was an opportunity that RNG would not make it to Worlds if other teams than like Top and JD Gaming basically made it to the finals just because other teams would have more championship points than they would to be able to even make the regional finals, which is where they ended up qualifying from. So there was a risk that they would not even make it into that regional finals.
But now we're seeing the landscape of the the upcoming Worlds tournament kind of shape up. We only have a couple more teams to grab yet, but for the most part, pretty much everyone is decided here currently.
Yeah, so looking forward to the upcoming finals for the LCS, for the LEC, and where positions shake out in those for who's going to play-ins, who's going to the world main stage, and kind of what groups they'll end up in. So a lot of Worlds excitement in the future. But I think that kind of wraps up our League of Legends talk for this week.
Yeah, just a couple more notes, and we can get you good people out of here. I just want to comment here on the Champions tournament going on in Valorant right now. Couple of just some really exciting matchups. A lot of the group stage matchups going to all three maps, which is super exciting. Most of the round scores are pretty high too. Interestingly enough, though, we had two of the APAC teams, which I'm pretty sure is just defined as East Asia. So it was EDG just got knocked out, and one of the other Chinese teams. So I only bring that up to think, like, it's funny how games are regional, where like just on the org name, you're like, oh, they're going to Worlds in this game. I'm curious, but it's I guess it's much different. But as we're coming out of group stage, we have some surprises, and I'm pretty sure the knockout stage is being decided currently. But it's been a pretty fun tournament overall.
Nice. It's definitely interesting with that because you do have a lot of regional organizations that kind of carry through, but then you have organizations that become much more international. We've seen Cloud9 in different games take on. They had a fully Korean team in what was the game that came out? It was like a 5v5, but a shooter.
Overwatch?
Yes. Cloud9, I'm pretty sure, had a full Korean Overwatch team.
Oh, that's cool.
They had picked up, I believe, Gambit's CSGO roster at one point. So
yeah, that's like a Russian org.
Yeah, so they've kind of they picked up the players from Gambit when Gambit pulled out of CSGO. I think it recently. I don't know if they still have them, but nonetheless, there's some organizations that do kind of try to have much more of an international base and then others that are more regional. So it does mix it up when you jump from something like League of Legends to Valorant and the teams and organizations and where they're all playing.
Yep. Name recognition doesn't equal where their standings would be everywhere else. And that's not logical thinking to think so. But yeah, it's just funny. But I think there are just some other great talent at the tournament. So I'm basically just saying two teams that have been eliminated thus far with no much further point to be made other than I just enjoy some good Valorant broadcasts. But I just want to talk a little bit. I'm pretty sure one of the best games of Commander that I've ever played.
Nice.
And I have a couple of notes here just to explain why it was so exciting, and then we can move on. I want to hear your flavor of the week here. And this is just bullet points of how it went and just notes of excitement. So I was able to present an early win on turn 3 or 4. So I was basically able to show the table. I was like, hey, do I win right now? Player 2 next to me said no. She bounced my commander back to my hand, so that shut that down. At the end of my turn, she looks to cast, it's a card called Ad Nauseam. It basically just puts a fuck ton of cards into your hand. It just draws you a fuck ton of cards. So she wants to do that. Player 4 then says, that seems fun. I would like to do that too. So he casts a copy spell to say, I'm going to copy that to do it for me. So They both put like 20 cards into their hand, and then it gets passed to player 2. She looks for little bit of value, then passes. Turn of rotation gets back to her. That player looks to win like at instant speed, while player 3 is like taking action at her end step. So player 2 is like, that's cute, I'm going to try and win now. A whole bunch of interaction goes on the stack. Player 4 and player 3 are like countering things, countering each other's stuff. The stack is like four or five spells deep. There's a bunch of things pointed at different things. The storm count's really high. And this was all just for like end step shenanigans, right? So then it passes priority again, goes around, and finally then on like turn 5, once everybody was bled out of all their counter spells, all their interaction, then player 4 was able to put a deterministic enough win on the board that was like, yeah, I could roll a couple of dice here, but I pretty much have the game. But it was just so crazy to see all 4 decks pretty much try and do their thing and then just get stopped.
Yeah.
Until finally somebody had enough gas to win. It
That's
was
wild.
crazy. Like, the stack was super deep where there were a bunch of spells live all at the same time. So that means the storm count was really high, meaning if somebody casts a spell where storm matters,
Based on like spells that have been cast
right,
and everything.
it was going to be a massive payoff. Like, it was just a wild game, and just everything going off. Player 4 ended up taking it. I just want to shout him out. I think he's got a Twitch channel. It's called Shatter Gang EDH. He won that game. It was beautiful piloting on his Krark and Sakashima deck. So all good stuff. Just want to shout out Death again, obviously, for inviting me. I love having him as a friend to play games with. So yeah, just good CDH. That was the best game of Magic I've ever played.
That's awesome. That's very, very cool to get to see, like, not only like decks doing what they're like trying to do, but also getting the card pulls to be able to do it. Especially that early on, to just immediately just like roll it into a brawl.
It was sick. It was super cool. But yeah, that was just a little bit of my weekend. But Aaron, I want to hear about your flavor of the week and we can get these people out of here.
Sounds good. I'll keep it relatively short. So my music and food tie together a little bit because they were both part of my drive down to the shore this past weekend. So for my food, we got poke bowls on the drive down. Nice. I was driving. I will say not the easiest food to eat while you're driving.
Sure, yeah.
I fortunately had some stop and go traffic and a couple of traffic lights that I was able to wolf it down. Nonetheless, absolutely delicious. Giant bowl of sushi, basically. Like, that's never a bad thing.
Sure.
For my music, though, as we were riding down, Colleen and my other friend Tyler were doing sing-alongs. Colleen always is my DJ, permanent position in the car, DJing for us, and the two of them
hell yeah
love sing-alongs. They love show tunes. We were jamming out to some Queen, just all sorts of different shows and whatnot.
Oh, hell
they
yeah.
had solos, they had duets, they were going in, and even though I did not know a lot of lyrics as the songs were coming, it was a blast to listen to them, have a good time, and
Nice.
they're both solid singers, so I enjoyed just getting to jam out and basically get some free entertainment while I was driving on down. And then last, for my visual medium, the new Lord of the Rings show, The Rings of Power, came out. I watched the first episode yesterday. Enjoyed it a lot. It is intriguing, and I'm looking forward to everything moving forward. But there are a lot of nice touches and kind of characters that were coming back or components of the story where you're learning more about the origins of the Lord of the Rings story.
Yep.
And so enjoyed that first episode. Looking forward to checking out the second one since that's out as well. Just
Very cool.
had the time to watch it yet, but that is my flavor of the week.
Yeah, checking out the world of Middle-earth before the War of the Rings, which in the history of Middle-earth, it's only a small bit of time.
Oh yeah, it's old.
Yeah,
it is. This
crazy.
is way back. So very cool that they're putting that out, and I'm looking forward to the rest of the show. But the first episode definitely piqued my interest.
Nice. Well, I'm glad you're enjoying it. I know Sarah has looked at that, so with your recommendation, maybe I'll pass that along. My visual medium here for the week is less maybe cultured than something like that. We watched a movie called The Lost City with Channing Tatum and the lady that plays Erin Brockovich, I'm pretty sure. And it's about, I don't even know what it's about, but overall it was just kind of loose and entertaining. But there were a couple of moments where the love interest character, Channing Tatum's character, he actually has some like very poignant things to say that you got to credit the writers. There were a couple moments that were like, man, that I've thought about afterwards, especially. There's a moment where he's trying to like push her up a cliff, and he says, I know you think it's safer to hold on and stay here, but we have to keep moving up. And like in that moment, yeah, you keep climbing up the wall, because you don't want to fall and whatever. But just like as a microcosm for life, I think that it's like beautiful. Like you can't just stay here where you think it's safer. You got to move on, no matter how much it hurts, no matter how scared you are, whatever.
Life keeps moving, and you've got to move with it.
Yeah, and just like little moments like that where with giving a little thought, they're like, oh, wow, that's like pretty powerful. So like funny, interesting little movie that I think will just be lost to time in general. My food here for the week, I was looking in my cupboard, and I am a tinkerer, and I saw a whole bunch of like quarter empty, half empty bags of things, and I was like, guess what this is? This is all just trail mix in a bunch of different bags. So I condensed it all, I threw it all into one thing, mixed it all up, and I made my own homemade trail mix, and that ended up being quite tasty and enjoyable. And then Sarah also made some Brussels sprout salad, which was basically just like the leaves of the salad, whipped up a nice little dressing, so that was huge. That was pretty good. And then my music, this is going to sound depressing, but it was enjoyable. I was sitting in the dark before bed, and I decided I don't want to watch anything. I don't want to do anything, but I'm not tired yet.
Gotcha.
So I just put my headphones in, want to listen to a couple songs, and I got 10 to 12 songs on a shuffle. And it's amazing the difference between just having a song on and listening to a song, where that's the only thing that you're doing. You hear all the little guitar strums, the note, like everything.
Huge
and I was
difference.
like, wow, man, this is pretty cool. And it was just funny having the thought to myself of like, wow, I must not have just sat here and listened to music in a long time, because it felt like a new experience.
Yeah, it's something that I like. Music is something that I typically have going on with something else, like driving or making dinner or whatever, and it's not often, and I don't know if it's just my attention span, but it's not often that I will just sit, and even I was saying at the beach this week, like I'm not a beach sitter.
Right.
Like I want to play bocce or go in the water or have a conversation or play spike ball. Like I need to be doing something, and even if there's music, like just sitting there is it still seems almost like silence in some instances where it's like I need additional stimulation of some sort, and maybe that is not a good thing, that I am not as good at taking the time to just sit and chill out, or maybe it's just a part of my nature. But I think it's what in the instances that I have had to sit and just listen, or that I've forced myself to, like there's definitely so much you get out of the music that you don't in other settings.
Yeah, when you're not able to hear like the detail as well. So yeah, that was just like a nice little enjoyable little meditative thing that I was able to do. It was just pretty fun. But that is my flavor of the week here. I would just like to say thank you everybody for listening. This is episode 100. If you enjoy the show, please tell a friend. It's the easiest way to grow the show. We're trying to get a bigger audience here. Yeah, Aaron, tell them where to find us.
Yeah, check us out on Google Podcasts. Check us out on Spotify. Hit us up on Twitter at Tall and Short of One. We're on YouTube. But as always, like Justin said, we appreciate everyone listening. We love doing this. That's why we made it this far to episode 100. It's a really cool milestone to reach, and without the support and everything, it wouldn't have been as much fun to make it this far. So we really appreciate you all. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen and enjoy with us.
Yeah, new episodes every Thursday. Tell a friend, and peace out, everyone.
Later.